What's up, Rob? Hope you're doing well, man. I don't know which one's easier for me, just to like respond to your email or to just say this out loud, but I'm gonna go with this format just because I miss you. So with that being said, first and foremost, dude, your bench is looking great. There's really not a lot that I can really say. Your bar path is looking awesome. Your pin presses are looking much softer on the pins, and you seem to have a lot more control on your bench. And again, your bar path is probably one of the better bar paths that I've seen out of any of my athletes. And you know how good my athletes are at bench. Um, so nice job on that. Felt like on front squats you could have probably went a little heavier. They looked a little too easy in my opinion, or maybe that's just how you squat. But I would like to see you go a little heavier, maybe get a little bit of grinding action going on those squats. Mainly because, to be perfectly frank, I think one of the biggest things that we have to change about you is that we have to kind of make sure that you're not a stylistic squatter and that you actually can grind through shit. And that starts with accessories and starts with just getting that neurological connection going on with that movement and that ability to be uncomfortable with or being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? The one thing that I did want to majorly talk about was your deadlift. So while you're not necessarily rounding your back to a high degree, you're not necessarily catbacking. There is a pretty high amount of thoracic rounding that I'm seeing. You're not like obviously rounding for the performance benefit, but I think you're rounding just for just to get the bar moving off the floor. So what I will ask you to do here is pretend to follow along with me as best you possibly can. Oh, and here's Dimitri, fucking furry gnocchi, just chilling, not doing anything in the crib. But anyways, um, all right, follow along with me here. All right, so pretend like you're sticking your fingers out like you're a zombie. And then now from here, sink your shoulder blades slightly back so that way they're neutral. And then pull down as hard as you possibly can with your scaps. Now, once you've pulled down as hard as you possibly can with your scaps, try to pull slightly back. Not using necessarily your shoulder blades, but more so focusing on trying to pull the slack out of that bar. Now, if you do that and try to focus on leading with the chest, you should actually have a straighter back when you pull. I want you to try to think about pulling that bar to the middle of your chest before you even start driving through your heels. That way, it should be a little bit easier for you to actually really engage your hamstrings. Another really small tip that I'd like you to kind of think about here is when you're in your bottom setup position, right before you're about to pull, try to think about dragging your hips slightly closer to your heels using only your hamstrings. And if you do that, that should actually turn on your hamstrings like crazy, and it should put much more emphasis on that. Because we can fairly assume that going forward, that if you round your back, you're giving your hamstrings a break. And the closer and closer you get to your meet, the more we're going to have to rely very heavily on like your previous cat backing. So early on, really try to focus very, very heavily on using your hamstrings because that will allow you to pull with a straighter back going forward. And I also think that that will also allow you to use your hamstrings a lot more in a low bar back squat situation because right now your hamstrings are probably the weakest link as of right now. So if you think of it as not necessarily doing what it takes to get through the set, but think about every single rep that involves posterior chain to be valuable in building your posterior chain for a game day. But with that being said, dude, that's pretty much all I've got. If you have any specific questions, feel free to let me know or send me a quick text or anything like that. But generally, I'm really happy with how your movements are going and how you're beating it week to week. I'm not necessarily too happy that you're failing reps every once in a while, especially on bench, but it does mean that you're pushing yourself, and for that, I'm actually quite happy. The main goals for this week: feel your hamstrings, get that back a little bit straighter by way of getting your back involved a little bit more in the lift. So pull the slack out and get your chest up a little bit higher. And thirdly, so I said no miss reps on bench. Get that back a little bit straighter to feel your hamstrings. And thirdly, let's try to push it a little bit more on that front squat. All right, I want to see things kind of slow down a little bit. I'm comfortable with pushing the intensity a little bit more on that front squat, especially for higher reps. Now, with that being said, man, I can't stop thinking about you in that UPS uniform. And that's pretty much it. I'll see you later, man. Take care.